Hello there, welcome back to Writer's Muse. This is episode 2, hence why I put episode 2 in the title. This is the corner of this channel where I talk about all things writing. We're going to leave the books alone just for a little bit. This is where I talk about writing, and today I'm going to talk about pants. When I filmed my AuthorTube newbie tag, I made it very clear and very explicit that if I had to be put into the camp of either a plotter or a pantser, I'm very much in the pantser camp. Now, before I go any further, I suppose I should just briefly say what those two camps entail. If you're in the plotter camp, pretty self-explanatory. You plot and outline your novel very, very succinctly, very much tons of detail. You know exactly what's going to happen in every part of your story, with the occasional, surprise thrown in. Pantsing, by definition then, is the opposite. It's generally where you approach a project or a manuscript with very little outline, very little idea about where you're going, if any. Sometimes you will have, maybe an ending in mind, maybe kind of a main event in mind, but that's it. You generally don't have anything to go by. So they are two completely different ways of approaching writing. I'm just going to talk about a few of the reasons why I approach writing this way, as opposed to structuring my work very, very definitively. The main reason I would say is because I like to surprise myself when I'm writing. As I said, I don't know what's going to happen. What I do is I kind of spin threads, if you like. Threads of story that may or may not contribute to the overall story. So in the very, very early stages of a first draft, the first few chapters, before I actually commit to writing those first chapters, I will have a bit of a play with my characters, and I will put them in different scenarios and different situations and just see how they react to those situations and react to the people within those situations. And from that I can see which characters will bounce off one another and which characters will clash with one another, and how characters will react in other situations that are very similar to those ones that I've kind of experimented with. And from those threads, eventually I will have enough of those threads to kind of make links, which will then become the story. So for example, let's try and think of a good example now. In my latest manuscript, which is the second book involving my Quins of Sarsaran, I have one of those Quins who effectively has power over lightning. And in order to get lightning, certainly maybe early on in her career, if you like, she can't just generate it. It needs to come about as a result of a thunderstorm. Only then can she really tap into her powers. At the other end of the spectrum, you've got another Quin who has control over nature. And I figured to myself, as I was just writing one of his, initial experimental scenes, well, surely if he's controlling nature, he's going to control weather, and from that I could create this set of circumstances which would then lead my lightning Quin to get her powers, because my nature Quin could, I don't know, for whatever reason which I've still not thought of, maybe because he gets angry or something like that, he can then generate a thunderstorm, and from that my lightning Quin can get her lightning. So that's just an example of how experimenting with different threads and different ideas can culminate into a coherent structure. Now obviously, as with both approaches, they both have their pros and their cons. The con of my approach is that there are a lot of threads in the early draft that don't get used because they have no place. They have no links later on in the story which I can connect them to, and so they have to be discarded. And that is a lot of wasted work. And I fully appreciate that. I do a lot of writing, and a lot of it is going to be a waste of time. That's the cold, hard truth of the way I do things. It is impossible when you don't have an outline, when you don't have a skeleton, to make every single one of your ideas fit together like a jigsaw. You can't do it. You can try your best to keep an overall broad picture as you're writing, which I do, but it's not possible to use everything and to bring everything together, which means that obviously the editing process becomes very, very important to me. I'm not someone who can really roll out a first draft and be happy with it, because there's a lot of loose threads that need to be either tied up in a different way or completely discarded. I would suggest that if you are an outliner, if you've really outlined your book carefully and you've stuck to it, then your first draft is going to be pretty strong, I would say, in terms of plot and in terms of structure. And that is obviously a big plus for the plotters. Having said that, one of the reasons that I stick to how I do things, despite the time-consuming work ethic, and despite the fact that a lot of it is going to end up not being used, is I almost feel that my character reactions are very much in the moment, very organic, very impulsive almost. And I feel that it lends itself, by doing it this way, to characters reacting naturally rather than artificially. Because I feel that in a lot of books, you can kind of tell when a character reaction is forced, or when a character reaction is driven by a plot point. A character only reacts in a certain way to facilitate moving the plot along. You can tell that it's very dum dum dum, very structured. With this approach, with the pantsing approach, I feel that character decisions can be far more instinctive and impulsive, as I said, and that will then surprise me. That will keep me on my toes. There have been tons of times when I've thought in my head as I've been writing this scene that it's going to go one way, but then I think to myself, my character's just said this, or my character's just done this. He wouldn't react in the way I originally thought. He's going to go straight onto a completely different direction, and that in turn will then open up a whole new set of possible story opportunities. So that's another reason why I write like I do. Right then, that was just a little bit of an insight as to how I approach my writing. I'm a proud pantser. Let me know down in the comments how you approach things. If you are a writer, or if you are just starting writing, do you outline, or do you just go with the flow and see what happens? I would love to know, because it's a fascinating debate. If you enjoyed today's video, please do not hesitate to give it a like. If you are new to the channel and you've only just found me today, check some of my other videos out, and if they are your cup of tea as well, subscribe to the channel and you will be hit with regular writing and booktube videos. That is all I have for you today. So, with that being said, my name is Mark, this is Toast Dragon Fantasy, and I will hopefully see you in the next video. Goodbye.